All right, hey Indian Creek 8th grade students, welcome to today's e-learning live stream video. Why don't we jump in? Oh, sorry, today is Wednesday, April 15th. Originally it was going to be tax day. So why don't we jump into our daily updates? So if we look at yesterday, we had 46 out of 51 students who submitted yesterday's ELA attendance form. That's awesome. I have the results from the different questions that you all answered on here. So 46 out of 51, that's great. That's 90%. And then for the quiz for social studies, as of maybe about 15 minutes ago, we had 39 out of 51 students who answered that. So if you know off the top of your head that you are not one of those people who submitted that, just go ahead and please get that turned in as soon as possible. So the class plan for today is I'll look over the Google form that was sent out into Google Classroom for today. We're going to go over Chapter 3 of Animal Farm. And then I will preview the quiz over chapters 1 through 3. It's a little bit different. I would say hopefully you're going to see this and get to listen to me go over chapter 3. And then if you haven't, watch the videos going over chapters 1 and 2 before you take the quiz, because a lot of the information that you would want to include on your quiz responses is going to be in those videos. We will also talk about an optional writing response for chapter 3 for those of you who are looking for a little bit of additional points or additional writing work. We'll talk about that. And then for social studies, we will review the part 4 quiz from yesterday and then today's assignment, which is part 5 notes. All right, shortest social studies video yet for this year is for today. All right, so let's look at yesterday's journal highlights. So I went with, because we're getting a little bit more intensive in the writing over these last couple days, or the time spent reading, I just wanted to give some more fun questions. They're kind of like, would you rather, but I didn't ask you to expand. I just asked you to answer, kind of like this or that. So the first question here was, which would you rather watch, Netflix/Hulu, basically the streaming services, or YouTube? This one was actually closer than I would have guessed. We had just over 50%, about 53% say the streaming services, and then 47% went with YouTube. If the small number of people who didn't turn this in voted the right way, there is maybe a possibility we could have ended with a 50-50 tie. The second one, how would you rather spend a day in the city or out in nature? Basically 2-to-1, we had 68% say they would rather be outside. I would absolutely rather be outside in nature. I'm sure all of you could have guessed that. And then about 32% who said they would have rather spent a day in a city. Nothing wrong with the city. I like going down in the city for a day, but give me the choice and I would take nature. And then finally, this one, what would you rather eat for breakfast? We had French toast, pancakes, or waffles. Just squeaking out the victory at 38% was pancakes. We had waffles in second at 36%, and then 25.5% was French toast. I'm sure for a lot of you, like me, it would also be, what kind of mood you're in, and are you talking about homemade? Are you talking about out at a restaurant? There's a whole big discussion I feel like we could have with this one, but I know that you all have things that you're trying to do for today. I'm sure that most of you probably don't want to hear my take on the different breakfast foods, so I will just leave it at that. Pancakes just edging out waffles, both of them clearly ahead of French toast. So those are the results from the poll questions for yesterday. We'll jump over here now to the Google form for today. So just the first 2 parts reminds you that the Animal Farm quiz for part 1, it says you can look back through the story while you are taking the quiz. This is also on the quiz itself, so your screens are not going to be locked. You can look back through the story. It says, please use your resources, use pieces of information from the story to support your answers. And then just a reminder that I will be going over chapter 3 in a little bit here, so you can watch that before you take the quiz if you would like as well. Then just reminding you about the optional chapter 3 writing response. We'll talk more about that when we get to it. But essentially, just like all the other optional assignments, if you do well enough that it boosts your grade, it goes in. Otherwise, it does not count. It'll just be excused for those of you who have seen. I'm just putting it in as exempt, almost as though like you were absent for those assignments. You will need a strong, well-explained answer to get credit for this one. So please don't just turn this one in blank or with a one-sentence response. You're not going to get any credit for that. So just if you're going to take the time to write a well thought out and well-explained response, you can get credit for that. And then your attendance responses, again, we have 3 of them today. So which would you rather play on a day inside? Which, based on how the weather's looking today, it's been snowing here since I've been up. I'm guessing that it's snowing out there by all of you. So this could be a question you ask yourself today. Are you going to go with board games or are you going to go with video games? Then the second question, which would you rather be able to do? Speak all languages or talk to animals? So in other words, would you rather be able to communicate with all human beings or be able to communicate with animals? And then finally, we did a food one yesterday. We're ending with the food one today. You're getting dessert. You're going with cake, cookies, or pie. All right, so I will have those poll results again tomorrow on the live stream for those of you who are wondering as well. But that is the attendance Google form for language arts for today. All right, now I'm going to jump on over to Animal Farm. Your assignment yesterday was to read chapter 3. So that is what we are going to talk about. So in chapter 3, we are looking at life on the farm after the revolution. Chapter 2, we saw the revolution. And why don't we just jump right in with our summary. So the animals band together to make the summer that follows the revolution the best that the farm has ever seen. The pigs find ways to use some of the different human tools, and all of the animals pitch in as best as they can. So not everyone is able to do the same amount of work, but almost all of the animals are doing as much as they can to help out the farm. Boxer especially becomes an inspiration with his newfound motto, "I will work harder." The animals also create a flag and have a meeting each week on Sundays to debate new ideas, where Snowball and Napoleon constantly disagree with each other's views. Snowball creates many committees, most of which fail, except for those that are aiming to teach the other animals to read and write. The literacy of each animal varies, with all of the pigs being able to learn how to read and write, and other animals being able to pick up bits and pieces. Boxer, sadly, can never learn more than 4 letters of the alphabet. You might have remembered that Clover is able to read a little bit more. There are some of the dogs that are able to read the commandments, but then there are a number of animals that aren't able to get anything or read at all. And so to help those animals who can't read the commandments, Snowball teaches them the phrase, 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. The sheep especially like this phrase, and they will chant it often throughout the days. Napoleon does not help any of Snowball's committees. He says they're a waste of time. And instead, he focuses on raising the new puppies who are born on the farm. He raises them in a loft away from the rest of the animals. So he says he's putting his focus on the youth and on the future. The animals also learn that the pigs were the ones who had taken the missing milk from the end of chapter 2. And they have also been taking all of the milk and the windfall apples for themselves. Squealer goes to the other animals and explains to them that these foods help the pigs think, and that the pigs' brains are needed to prevent Mr. Jones and his men from coming back to the farm. This explanation is enough to convince the other animals that the pigs should continue to receive all of the milk and apples on the farm for fear of Mr. Jones's return. All right, so that's just a short summary of chapter 3. The only character who's really introduced, or really it's a group of characters who's introduced in chapter 3, they're the sheep. They are among the many animals who cannot learn any letters. It is for their purpose that Snowball creates the phrase, 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. The sheep greatly enjoy this saying, and they will sometimes spend hours just repeating it over and over again out in the fields. It's something, not to spoil it, but you're going to continue to hear this for a long time going forward with the story. All right, so now I thought it would be good to look at some important quotes from chapter 3. So this is from early on, and it says, "And every animal down to the humblest worked at turning the hay and gathering it. Even the ducks and hens toiled to and fro all day in the sun, carrying tiny wisps of hay in their beaks. In the end, they finished the harvest in 2 days less time than it had usually taken Jones and his men. Moreover, it was the biggest harvest that the farm had ever seen. There was no wastage whatever. The hens and ducks with their sharp eyes had gathered up the very last stalk, and not an animal on the farm had stolen so much as a mouthful." So obviously an important quote talking about the harvest, the animal's real first true test running the farm. And it's talking about how each animal did the very best that he or she could. There was no wastage. It was the best harvest the farm had ever seen. And every animal pitched in and no one stole. So just showing the state of the farm now that the animals are in control. Another important quote also from this time was that Boxer was the admiration of everybody. His answer to every problem, every setback was, "I will work harder," which he adopted as his personal motto. Just personifying Boxer as kind of the top worker, someone that everybody else looks up to, and then introducing his motto, "I will work harder," which we will see him continue on with moving forward. Then we have, "But everyone worked according to his capacity. The hens and ducks, for instance, saved 5 bushels of corn at the harvest by gathering up the stray grains. Nobody stole, nobody grumbled over his rations. The quarreling and biting and jealousy, which had been normal features of life in the old days, had almost disappeared." Again, just another quote reinforcing that idea. Everyone's pitching in. There's no bickering. There's no fighting. Every animal is doing his or her best, and they are all getting along at this point. Another quote that I thought was important from page 11. "Here the work of the coming week was planned out and resolutions were put forward and debated." This is talking about the weekly meetings that the farm has on Sundays. "It was always the pigs who put forward the resolutions. The other animals understood how to vote, but could never think of any resolutions of their own. Snowball and Napoleon were by far the most active in the debates. But it was noticed that these two were never in agreement. Whatever suggestion either of them made, the other could be counted on to oppose it." And then moving forward, "The pigs had set aside the harness room as a headquarters for themselves. Here in the evenings, they studied blacksmithing, carpentering, and other necessary arts from books which they had brought out of the farmhouse." So a couple different things going on here. It's talking about how the pigs are kind of taking the leadership role in terms of thinking. In fact, they go so far as to set aside a separate room for themselves. So just that, there's every animal's pitching in, but you can see the pigs kind of rising to the top in terms of planning and in terms of thinking. And then also mentioning that Snowball and Napoleon, they are the most active ones, and the two of them can never seem to agree. So I kind of mentioned this in a video before, but I'm sure there are some of you in looking at the allegory chart, which we will be going back to after we read chapter 4. But Snowball and Napoleon, if you're thinking about people from history, I'm sure that you can predict the two figures from history that these two characters are representing. All right, so again, very much equal amongst the animals at this point, except you can start to see some of the things that the pigs are doing or the pigs are getting is kind of putting them above the rest of the animals on the farm. And then this quote just reinforces that. This is Squealer's speech to the rest of the animals after it's discovered that the pigs have gotten all of the milk and apples. So Squealer says, "You do not imagine, I hope, that we pigs are doing this in a spirit of selfishness and privilege. Many of us actually dislike milk and apples. Milk and apples, this has been proved by science, comrades, contain substances absolutely necessary to the well-being of a pig. We pigs are brain workers. The whole management and organization of this farm depend on us. Day and night we are watching over your welfare. It is for your sake that we drink that milk and eat those apples. Do you know what would happen if we pigs failed in our duty? Jones would come back. Yes, Jones would come back. "Surely, comrades," cried Squealer almost pleadingly, skipping from side to side and whisking his tail. "Surely there is no one among you who wants to see Jones come back." So this is the explanation that Squealer gives to the other animals. Obviously, I think he's taking advantage of the fact that he knows more than the other animals and can think more clearly than other animals, but basically saying to these animals, we're eating these apples and drinking this milk for you. We are the ones who are keeping Jones from coming back. Now, I'm sure all of you can draw the conclusion that this is not actually true. The fact that pigs are eating apples and drinking milk is not what would prevent Mr. Jones from coming back. But because Squealer knows that he's more intelligent than the other animals, and he knows that their biggest fear is Jones coming back, he knows that this speech will be enough to convince them, which it turns out that it is. All right, so the last thing that I wanted to mention here for chapter 3 was just to update what the barn is looking like, because this is something that will come into play moving forward in the story. You'll see when we get to that point. But so right now we have the 7 commandments that are on the side of the barn, and then the phrase 4 legs good, 2 legs bad has also been added in big letters above the rest of the commandments. So this is what the animals have on the barn right now at the end of chapter 3. All right, so Paige, I see that you asked a question. Do we just fill out the allegory chart as we go, or will you tell us when to fill it out? I will tell you when to fill it out, and we will do it like before, where I will preview, these 2 characters you can figure out and fill in on the allegory chart from this chapter. But if you want to start filling it out with your own predictions, you can absolutely do that as you read. Like I said, with Snowball, with Napoleon, you can probably guess who they represent, at least come down to 2 choices, who they represent from history. Moses is probably one that you can predict as well. All right. But that will be something that we will come back to after chapter 4. There will be a handful of characters that will update on that. But if you want to do some work on your allegory chart, you can do that in the meantime as well. All right. So I mentioned that there is a quiz for chapters 1 through 3 that was posted in Google Classroom. That is your assignment for today. I just wanted to go over a couple things for those of you who are watching and anybody who watches later in case you don't read through every bit of the instructions. So answer each question below as thoroughly as you can. You will be getting partial credit for answering part of the questions that are worth multiple points. So even if you don't know the full answer, show me what you know so you can get some of the credit for it. Remember that you can look back through the story, and you should use specific details to back up your answers for the questions that are worth multiple points. So this should not be locked. Obviously, I think I had it set up right in Google Classroom, but just in case I don't, please send me an email so I can make sure that it's not locked, because I want you to be able to look back through the story while you're answering this. All right. So first question, the main idea of Old Major's speech to the animals in chapter 1. This is a multi-point question. You want to go and use details from the story. What is his main idea? Go back and look at the chapter 1 video I recorded, because we talk about Old Major's main ideas in there. The name of the song, Old Major Teaches to the Animals. That one should be pretty straightforward. That's just a one-pointer. What causes the revolution? So you can think of the specific event or just overall, what do you think causes the animals to revolt against the men? That would be more big picture, or there is a specific event or the events of a specific day that cause the animals to fight back against men as well. As long as you support your answer with details from the story, you'll be good to go with that. The name of the social system the animals create, and they describe it in 7 commandments. It is a version of communism. It is the allegory for communism in the story. That's a one-pointer. Which animals rise to lead the farm after the rebellion? You can think of the specific names of the animals or just which type of animal in general. Both of those answers are correct. What is the phrase that Snowball teaches to the animals who can't read the 7 commandments? We just talked about it. It's on the barn. So just, That one should be there. The sheep love it. I can tell you that one, that the sheep love that phrase. And then finally, what is life like for the animals in the months after they take over the farm? And why do you feel this way? This is the other one that's worth 4 points. That's another question. You want to make sure that you're using details from the story to back that up as well. All right, and that's something we just talked about in this video. So if you want to go back, look over what I had mentioned, what was on those slides, you can do that as well. All right, so that is the quiz over chapters 1 through 3 for today. That's all you have that's required for language arts for today. All right, so let's jump over to social studies. This was the quiz from yesterday. Just to go over 4 questions, each one worth 1 point. What important event occurred during the March on Washington in 1963? Hopefully all of you remembered. I mean, it was a march for jobs, for equality. This is where Martin Luther King gave his I Have a Dream speech. So a lot of you, even if you didn't mention that, got credit for that, but that was really the answer we were looking for, was that was where King gave his I Have a Dream speech. The name given to the campaign in the summer of 1964 was the Freedom Summer. All right, that was the name that was talked about in the video and on the notes. The leader of the Nation of Islam, who wanted African Americans to separate from whites entirely, that was Malcolm X, one of the civil rights leaders who was assassinated, unfortunately, during this time. And then, leading right into the last question, what happened to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in Memphis in 1968? He, too, was assassinated. All right, so those were the quiz questions from yesterday. Looks like we're still at 39 responses, so we're still waiting on 12 people. If you're one of those 12 people, go ahead and get that turned in as soon as possible, please. And then finally, for today, your social studies assignment is the notes for part 5, which is talking about the other groups who are seeking additional rights during this time. Because the civil rights era, main group was African Americans. It's the one that's always talked about, but there were a number of different other groups in America who were looking for rights as well. Talking about women, Americans with disabilities, talking about Hispanic Americans. So the video for today is looking at those groups as well. The video, I want to say, is like 6.5 minutes long. Very short, very easy. And I will be going over the answers to the notes, the key to the notes in my stream tomorrow. Okay, so language arts, review chapters 1 through 3, and then take the quiz on that. You do have a Google form for that. And then social studies, make sure you get your quiz turned in. And then the civil rights era outlines for part 5. All right, and then jumping back to language arts, this is the optional assignment for today, the writing response on chapter 3, which is looking at one of the quotes that I had mentioned in the slides. So it says, in chapter 3 of Animal Farm, the animals discover that the missing milk and windfall apples have been given to the pigs. And then Squealer explains the reason for this with the following speech. And I'm not going to read the whole speech for you, but I will tell you here, this speech is an example of irony. Irony means that the full meaning of a character's words or actions are clear to the audience or the reader, but unknown to other characters. So in other words, you as a reader understand more than the characters in the story. You know more than the animals who Squealer is talking to. You know the message behind what Squealer is saying and why he says what he says, even though the other animals don't. So in a well-developed paragraph, what is the irony in Squealer's speech? And some things you can think about. What do you know that the other animals don't know? And then why would Squealer explain things in this way? All right, so for those of you who are looking for additional points, additional opportunities to raise your grade, this is the way that you can do it today, writing a well-developed paragraph talking about the irony in Squealer's speech here. Again, this is 100% optional. You don't have to do it, but if you give enough to where your score on this assignment would boost your grade, it will go in. As I said before, please do not just write in 1 or 2 sentences and turn it in thinking you're going to get credit, because you won't. You are expected to write a well-developed paragraph, give details from the story, but if you do that, you get full credit for this assignment. All right? So again, optional, only for those of you who want it. If you're looking to do some more work on your writing, all that type of stuff, and it's just like our other optional assignments. All right. So otherwise, I think that's all I have for you all today. Quiz in language arts, notes in social studies, and then this writing response in language arts if you would like to do it. As always, please email me if you have any questions, any concerns, anything you're not sure about. But otherwise, I hope that everyone has a wonderful rest of their day. Like I said, it was snowing before. Hopefully, it's not still snowing out there for anybody who wants to be able to get outside just for a little while. But otherwise, until tomorrow, this has been Professor Blazek, and I will see everyone next time.